Crystal chandeliers cast splintered light across polished marble, each prism separating white into fragments of color that danced across the faces of Atlanta's elite. The air hung heavy with perfume, jasmine and sandalwood competing with the sharper notes of expensive cologne. Elena Carter adjusted the hem of her emerald silk dress, feeling the cool fabric slide between her fingertips as she stood at the periphery of her husband's 30th anniversary celebration for Carter Financial. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as Nathan approached, champagne flute dangling between manicured fingers. His smile never reached his eyes, blue ice beneath perfectly groomed brows. A quartet played Mozart in the corner, the notes too crisp, too perfect, like everything else in the life they'd constructed. "You're hiding again," Nathan said, his voice carrying just enough edge to make Elena's spine stiffen. "The Morgans have been asking about you." Elena's throat tightened. "I spoke with them earlier." The lie tasted metallic on her tongue. She hadn't spoken to anyone, really. 15 years of these functions, and still she remained the outsider, the second wife who'd never quite learned the rules. The weight of diamond earrings, Nathan's gift this morning, pulled at her lobes, a constant reminder of obligations. She reached for a passing waiter's tray, fingers trembling slightly as they closed around a flute of champagne. Bubbles tickled her nose as she took a sip, seeking courage in carbonation. "I need you present tonight," Nathan continued, his fingers wrapping around her elbow with practiced precision, tight enough to control, not enough to bruise. "This isn't the time for one of your episodes." The champagne soured in Elena's stomach. Her episodes, Nathan's term for her anxiety attacks, had become his favorite weapon, a reminder of her fundamental defect. The room suddenly felt too large and too small simultaneously, sound stretching and compressing like waves against her eardrums. "I'm fine," she whispered, the words hollow even to her own ears. Across the room, she caught sight of herself in a gilded mirror, dark hair swept into an elegant chignon, green eyes wide with something that looked uncomfortably like fear. Nathan's thumb brushed against her pulse point. "Good. Because I have an announcement to make, and I need my wife by my side." The tap of silver against crystal silenced the room. Conversations halted mid-sentence as Nathan stood at the center of the ballroom, his tailored tuxedo absorbing and reflecting light in equal measure. Elena stood beside him, her smile fixed in place, muscles aching from the effort. "Friends, colleagues, family," Nathan began, his voice carrying effortlessly. 30 years ago, I started Carter Financial with nothing but determination and a single client." Appreciative laughter rippled through the crowd. Everyone knew the single client had been Nathan's father's oldest friend, a connection that had opened every door. Elena felt sweat gathering at the small of her back, despite the room's perfect climate control. Something in Nathan's posture, a tightness in his shoulders, a certain gleam in his eye, triggered alarm bells. His hand found hers, fingers interlacing with uncomfortable pressure. "Tonight is about legacy," Nathan continued, gaze sweeping the room. "About building something that outlasts us all." The quartet had stopped playing. The only sounds were Nathan's voice and the soft clink of ice in glasses. Elena's heartbeat accelerated, pounding against her ribs like something desperate to escape. "Which is why," Nathan's grip tightened further, "I'm announcing 2 significant changes tonight." A murmur rippled through the assembled guests. This wasn't planned. Elena's mouth went dry, tongue sticking to the roof as she tried to swallow. "First, effective immediately, Carter Financial will merge with Westbrook Industries, creating the largest financial services firm in the Southeast. Applause erupted, faces turning toward the Westbrook table where James Westbrook, silver-haired and shark-eyed, raised his glass in acknowledgement. Elena's confusion must have shown on her face because Nathan's fingers dug deeper into her hand, a warning. And second, Nathan paused, his smile broadening into something Elena had never seen before, something almost cruel in its satisfaction. I'll be stepping into this new chapter with a partner who truly understands my vision. The room tilted slightly. Elena felt her knees weaken as Nathan released her hand and stepped away, one deliberate step that opened a chasm between them. Cynthia Westbrook has agreed to become not just our new chief operating officer, but also my wife. The silence was absolute, a vacuum that sucked all oxygen from the room. Then came a single gasp, Elena's own, that seemed to break the spell. Conversations erupted, heads turned, eyes fixed on her face with expressions ranging from shock to poorly concealed delight at the scandal unfolding. Cynthia Westbrook, James's daughter, 32, Harvard Business School, rose from her seat, a vision in white silk that contrasted with Elena's emerald dress, like a bride beside a discarded ornament. Her smile was apologetic, but triumphant, as she moved to stand beside Nathan. Elena and I have been discussing this transition for months, Nathan lied smoothly. She's been extraordinarily understanding about our situation. The room swam before Elena's eyes. Her fingers found the edge of a nearby table, gripping the linen cloth as though it might anchor her to reality. The lie was so enormous, so complete, that for a moment she wondered if she'd somehow forgotten entire conversations, if the anxiety medications had erased parts of her memory. The word escaped before she could stop it, hanging in the air like a broken promise. Nathan's expression hardened imperceptibly. Elena has agreed to step back gracefully. Haven't you, dear? Every eye in the room bored into her. The weight of expectation, to play her part, to accept humiliation with dignity, pressed down like a physical force. The diamond earrings suddenly felt like hooks piercing her flesh. Congratulations, she finally managed, the words scraping her throat raw. Someone pressed a fresh champagne flute into her hand. She raised it mechanically, watching light fracture through crystal and liquid, creating miniature rainbows that blurred as tears threatened. Nathan nodded, satisfaction evident in the slight relaxation of his shoulders. The room resumed breathing. The quartet began playing again, something in a minor key that felt like mockery. Elena stood frozen as guests approached, offering awkward platitudes disguised as congratulations. "So brave of you," whispered an acquaintance whose name escaped her. "Nathan always said you were reasonable," murmured another. Each comment drove the knife deeper, twisting the blade. The champagne in her glass remained untouched, bubbles slowly dying, going flat like her future. 15 years of marriage dissolved in 45 seconds of public humiliation. The diamond earrings caught the light, throwing shards of brilliance that seemed to cut her peripheral vision into fragments. With mechanical precision, Elena set down her glass. Her fingers rose to her ears, removing first one earring, then the other. The small weights felt impossibly heavy in her palm. Without a word, she placed them on the nearest table and turned toward the exit. "Elena," Nathan's voice cut through the crowd noise, "don't make a scene." She kept walking, each step gaining momentum. The massive double doors of the ballroom loomed ahead, carved oak panels that had seemed so impressive when they arrived. Now they represented escape, oxygen, survival. Elena. Nathan's voice held an edge of panic now. This wasn't the script. She was supposed to smile bravely through tears, to surrender gracefully. The cool night air hit her face as she pushed through the doors. The valet looked up, startled by her expression. "Mrs. Carter? Is everything—" "My car," she managed. "Please." Behind her, footsteps approached. Not Nathan's confident stride, but the click of Cynthia's heels. "Elena, wait. This doesn't have to be ugly." Elena turned slowly. Cynthia stood framed in the doorway, white silk glowing under the portico lights, her expression a practiced blend of sympathy and determination. "He's already transferred everything to new accounts," Cynthia said quietly. "The prenup is ironclad. Don't fight this. You'll only humiliate yourself further." The words landed like physical blows. Of course, Nathan had prepared. Of course, he'd stripped away everything before revealing the truth. The realization brought strange clarity, as though a fog had lifted. "Keep it all," Elena said, her voice steadier than she'd expected. "But you should know something about Nathan." She leaned closer, close enough to smell Cynthia's perfume, something expensive with notes of gardenia. "He discards people when they're no longer useful. I'm just today's trash. You'll be tomorrow's." The valet appeared with her car, the modest Volvo she'd insisted on keeping despite Nathan's disapproval. As she slid into the driver's seat, Elena caught sight of her reflection in the rearview mirror. Tear tracks had carved paths through her makeup, but her eyes held something new, a flicker of determination beneath the shock. She drove without destination, the city lights blurring as she followed roads at random. Rain began to fall, gentle at first, then in sheets that transformed the streets into liquid mirrors. Her phone buzzed repeatedly in her purse. Nathan, probably, angry that she deviated from his script. She silenced it without looking. Hours passed, or perhaps minutes. Time had become elastic, stretching and contracting with her heartbeat. The storm intensified, rain hammering against the windshield faster than the wipers could clear it. Lightning split the sky, illuminating unfamiliar countryside that had replaced the city's grid. Elena slowed, realizing she'd driven far beyond Atlanta's suburbs into rural darkness. The headlights caught a sign partially obscured by overgrown vegetation. Hale Estate, private property. The name tickled something in her memory. A newspaper article, perhaps, about an old money family that kept to themselves. Lightning flashed again, revealing wrought iron gates standing partially open at the end of a long gravel drive. Without conscious decision, Elena turned the wheel, tires crunching on wet gravel as she passed between stone pillars topped with carved figures that the darkness rendered indistinct. The drive wound through ancient oaks that formed a canopy overhead, momentarily sheltering her from the worst of the storm. As the trees parted, Elena gasped. Silhouetted against the night sky stood a mansion that seemed to belong to another century. Gothic revival architecture, with towers and turrets reaching toward the storm clouds like supplicating fingers. Most windows remained dark, but warm light spilled from several on the ground floor, creating golden rectangles on the rain-soaked lawn. Elena stopped the car, engine idling as indecision gripped her. She had no reason to be here, no connection to this place or its inhabitants, yet something pulled at her. Perhaps the simple fact that no one would think to look for her here. Another lightning flash illuminated the entire property for a split second, revealing details hidden by darkness. A rose garden gone wild, stone statues with features worn smooth by time, and, most startlingly, a figure standing at an upstairs window, watching her. Elena's breath caught. The figure, tall, masculine, remained visible even after the lightning faded, backlit by some interior light. He didn't move, yet she felt the weight of his attention like a physical touch. The rational choice would be to turn around, to find a hotel, to begin the process of rebuilding her shattered life. Instead, Elena switched off the engine. The sudden silence amplified the sound of rain hammering the roof and her own uneven breathing. As though her decision had triggered some response, the massive front door of the mansion swung open. A silhouette appeared. Another man, broader than the figure in the window, holding what appeared to be a lantern against the darkness. "You're trespassing," he called, voice carrying clearly despite the storm. "This is private property." Elena's hand froze on the door handle. What was she doing? She had nowhere to go, no plan, no connection to these people. Yet something about the house called to her, a sanctuary in the storm, both literal and metaphorical. She pushed open the car door, immediately drenched as rain poured inside. "I'm sorry," she called back, having to shout over the storm. "I got lost in the storm. I just need to—" Her words cut off as lightning struck terrifyingly close, the thunderclap immediate and deafening. In that flash of illumination, Elena saw the man's face clearly for the first time. Rugged features, watchful eyes, and an expression that shifted from suspicion to something else entirely as he took in her tear-streaked face and formal attire. But it was what she glimpsed behind him that stole her breath. The figure from the upstairs window now stood in the entrance hall. Even at this distance, even through the curtain of rain, something about his presence made Elena's skin prickle with an awareness that transcended ordinary perception. The man with the lantern turned, following her gaze, and something unspoken passed between the two men. When he looked back at Elena, his expression had changed. "You'd better come inside," he said, raising the lantern higher. "It's not safe out here during storms like these," the man finished, his words nearly lost to another crash of thunder. Elena stumbled forward through the downpour, each step sinking into the sodden earth. The rain plastered her dress against her skin, the fabric now a second skin, heavy and cold. She reached the stone steps leading to the massive front door where the figure stood, tall, imposing, utterly still in a way that seemed almost unnatural. "Thank you," she managed, water streaming down her face, mingling with the remnants of tears and makeup. Up close, the lantern-bearer was younger than she'd first thought. Perhaps early 30s, with the weathered look of someone who spent most of his time outdoors. His eyes, though, held a wariness that belied his offer of shelter. "Caleb Brooks," he said curtly, not offering his hand. "Head of security." Security. The word hung between them, raising more questions than it answered. What kind of private residence needed a head of security? The taller figure in the doorway stepped forward, and Elena felt the air around her change, a subtle pressure shift, as though the atmosphere itself responded to his movement. In the dim light of the entrance hall, his features emerged, aristocratic, severe, with eyes so dark they seemed to absorb rather than reflect the scant illumination. "Mr. Hale," Caleb addressed him, his tone shifting to something more formal. "This woman's car broke down in the storm." The man, Mr. Hale, studied Elena with unsettling intensity. "You're a long way from anywhere," he observed, his voice deep and resonant, carrying an accent she couldn't quite place. Something old world, refined yet faded, like antique velvet. I wasn't planning to be, Elena said, a shiver running through her that had little to do with her drenched state. I was driving to... Actually, I was just driving. The admission felt raw, exposing more than she'd intended. Something flickered in Mr. Hale's expression. Recognition, perhaps. Not of her face, but of something in her words. Her posture, the desperation that had driven her out into this night. Maggie, he called over his shoulder, not raising his voice, yet somehow making it carry. We have a guest. A small, round woman with salt and pepper hair appeared from a side corridor, wiping her hands on her apron. Her eyes widened at the sight of Elena. Dios mío, you're soaked through. Come inside properly. Her warmth was so unexpected, so human after the strange intensity of the men, that Elena nearly wept with relief. Griffin, Maggie addressed Mr. Hale with surprising familiarity. I'll take her to the blue room. She needs dry clothes and something warm to drink. Griffin Hale nodded once, a barely perceptible movement. See that she has everything she needs. His eyes met Elena's again, and she felt that same strange awareness prickle along her skin. We'll speak in the morning, Ms. Carter, she supplied. Elena Carter. Something passed across his face, a shadow, a recognition, gone before she could interpret it. Miss Carter, welcome to Thornwood. He turned and disappeared down a darkened corridor, moving with uncanny grace, leaving Elena with the distinct impression that she'd passed some test she hadn't known she was taking. Maggie's gentle hand on her arm drew her attention. Don't mind him, the housekeeper said softly. This way, please. Elena followed her up a grand staircase that curved along the wall of the entrance hall. The wood beneath her feet was ancient, polished to a soft gleam by generations of footsteps. Portraits lined the walls, faces with the same severe beauty as Griffin Hale, spanning what must have been centuries, judging by the changing styles of dress and portraiture. This house has been in the Hale family for generations, Maggie explained, noticing Elena's gaze on the paintings. Since before the Revolutionary War. The blue room, as Maggie called it, was spacious and elegant, dominated by a four-poster bed draped in midnight blue velvet. A fire already crackled in the hearth. How had it been lit so quickly? Casting dancing shadows across walls covered in faded silk damask. The bathroom is through there, Maggie indicated a door. I'll bring you something dry to wear and some tea. You're shaking like a leaf. Left alone, Elena moved to the bathroom, a surprisingly modern space tucked within the historical framework of the house. The contrast was jarring. Clawfoot tub alongside sleek fixtures, antique tiles meeting heated floors. She peeled off her ruined dress, the fabric making a wet slap against the floor. In the mirror, her reflection startled her. Mascara streaked down her cheeks, hair plastered to her skull, skin pale with cold. She looked haunted, a ghost of herself. The events of the evening crashed over her again. Nathan's announcement at their anniversary dinner, the whispers and stares, her flight into the storm. 10 years, she whispered to her reflection. 10 years, and you tell me at our anniversary dinner, in front of everyone. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Wrapping herself in a plush towel, she cracked the door to find Maggie holding a stack of clothing and a steaming mug. These should fit well enough, the housekeeper said. They belong to... well, they're clean and warm. Elena accepted them gratefully. Thank you. I don't know what I would have done if... Shh. Maggie hushed her gently. No need for that now. Get warm, drink your tea, rest. Everything looks different in the morning light. But as Elena slipped into the borrowed nightgown, soft cotton, expensive, with hand-embroidered detailing along the neckline, she wondered what morning light would reveal about this strange house and its inhabitants. The nightgown hung slightly loose on her frame, clearly made for someone with a more generous figure. She wondered who had worn it before her, and why Maggie had hesitated before explaining its origin. The tea was fragrant and soothing, with unfamiliar herbal notes that spread warmth through her chest. Elena sank into an armchair by the fire, cradling the mug between her palms. The storm continued to rage outside, rain lashing against the windows, but in here, wrapped in borrowed clothes in a stranger's house, she felt oddly secure. Until the soft sound at her door. Not a knock, more a gentle scratching, as though someone was running their fingernails lightly across the wood. Elena froze, the mug halfway to her lips. "Hello?" she called, her voice sounding thin in the large room. No answer, but the scratching came again, followed by what might have been a whisper, or simply the wind finding its way through the old house's many crevices. Setting down her tea, Elena crossed to the door and opened it a crack. The hallway was empty, lit only by wall sconces that cast more shadows than light. She was about to close the door when movement caught her eye, a flash of pale fabric disappearing around the corner at the end of the corridor. Curiosity overcame caution. Wrapping herself in the cashmere throw from the foot of the bed, Elena stepped into the hallway. The wooden floor was cool beneath her bare feet as she padded toward the corner where she'd seen the movement. Rounding it, she found herself in another corridor, this one lined with doors, all closed except one, which stood slightly ajar, a sliver of light spilling out into the darkness. As she approached, she heard voices, children's voices speaking in hushed, urgent tones. "She's not supposed to be here," one said. A girl's voice, high and clear despite the whisper. "Father let her in," another responded, so similar it could have been an echo. "But Adrian's men are watching the roads. What if they followed her?" Elena's breath caught. Who were they talking about? Who was watching the roads? She must have made some sound, for the voices suddenly ceased. The door swung open wider, and Elena found herself face to face with identical girls, perhaps 12 years old, with pale skin, dark hair, and eyes that seemed too old for their young faces. "You're the woman from the storm," one said. Not a question, but a statement of fact. "I'm Elena," she replied, feeling oddly formal. "I'm sorry if I disturbed you. I heard something at my door." The girls exchanged a glance, some silent communication passing between them. "That was us," the one on the left admitted. "We wanted to see you." "I'm Rowan," said the other. "This is Riley. We're twins." "I can see that," Elena smiled. The first genuine smile she'd managed since Nathan's announcement hours earlier. "It's nice to meet you both. Do you live here with Mr. Hale?" Another exchanged glance. "He's our father," Riley said, a hint of defensiveness in her tone. "Our mother died," Rowan added, watching Elena's face carefully for her reaction. "I'm very sorry," Elena said softly, recognizing the familiar shape of grief in their young faces. "That must be very difficult." Something in her tone must have resonated with them, for their posture relaxed slightly. "Would you like to come in?" Rowan asked, stepping back from the doorway. "We're not supposed to be awake, but the storm keeps us up." Their room was large and beautiful, clearly designed for children, but without the garish colors or plastic toys Elena associated with children's spaces. Instead, the furnishings were elegant and antique. Twin beds with carved headboards, a dollhouse that appeared to be a perfect miniature of Thornwood itself, bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes. "Your room is lovely," Elena said, settling into a window seat as the girls perched on their respective beds. "It was our mother's room when she was young," Riley explained, "before she married Father." Elena's gaze was drawn to a portrait above the fireplace, beautiful woman with the same dark hair as the twins, though her eyes were a striking green rather than the girl's deep brown. There was something in her expression, a vitality, a wildness barely contained within the formal pose. "Is that her?" Elena asked gently. Rowan nodded. "That's Mother. Her name was Vivian. She was very beautiful." "Father doesn't like to talk about her," Riley said, twisting a strand of hair around her finger. "It makes him too sad." "How long has she been gone?" Elena asked. 3 years, 2 months, and 14 days, Rowan answered promptly. The precision of the count spoke volumes about the depth of their loss. Elena recognized it. That careful tracking of time since the moment everything changed. "My father died when I was not much older than you," Elena offered. "I used to count the days, too." "Does it get easier?" Riley asked, her voice small. Elena considered lying, offering the platitude adults so often gave children. But something about these girls, their old eyes, their quiet dignity, demanded honesty. "Not easier," she said finally. "Different. The missing changes shape, becomes something you carry rather than something that carries you." The girls absorbed this, their expressions solemn. Outside, lightning flashed, illuminating the room in stark white light before plunging it back into the softer glow of the bedside lamps. "Why were you crying when you came to our house?" Rowan asked suddenly. Elena blinked, surprised by the direct question. "How did you know I was crying?" "We saw you from the window," Riley admitted. "You looked sad, like Father." The comparison startled her. "I received some bad news tonight," she said carefully. "From my husband. My ex-husband now, I suppose." "He hurt you," Rowan stated, not a question. "Yes," Elena whispered, the admission easier in this strange night, with these strange children. "He hurt me." Riley slipped from her bed and came to sit beside Elena on the window seat. After a moment's hesitation, she placed her small hand over Elena's. Her touch was cool, almost cold, but comforting nonetheless. "You can stay here," she said with a child's certainty. "Father won't make you leave in the storm." "Thank you," Elena smiled, touched by the gesture. "But I'll need to go in the morning. I have to figure out what comes next." "Where will you go?" Rowan asked, joining them at the window. The question hung in the air, unanswerable. Elena had fled without a plan, driven only by the need to escape the humiliation, the whispers, the pitying glances. Her house, their house, was no longer a refuge. Nathan had seen to that. "I don't know yet," she admitted, "but I'll figure it out." A noise in the hallway made all three of them turn. The door swung open wider, revealing Griffin Hale, his tall frame filling the doorway. In the dim light, his features seemed sharper, more defined, beautiful in the way of ancient statues, remote and perfect. "Girls," he said, his voice quiet, but carrying an unmistakable note of authority. "It's late." "We were just talking to Elena," Rowan explained, not seeming particularly concerned about being caught awake well past what must be their bedtime. "So I see." His gaze shifted to Elena, who suddenly felt acutely aware of her state of dress. The borrowed nightgown, the cashmere throw wrapped around her shoulders, her bare feet. "Ms. Carter, I trust you found your accommodations satisfactory?" "Yes, thank you," she said, rising from the window seat. "Your daughters were kind enough to keep me company." Something flickered in his expression at the word daughters. Pride, perhaps, or pain. "They should be sleeping," he said, though the reprimand held no real heat. "As should you. It's been a long night." The twins exchanged another of their silent communications before obediently climbing into their respective beds. Griffin moved into the room with that same uncanny grace, tucking each girl in with a tenderness that seemed at odds with his austere demeanor. "Sleep well, my darlings," he murmured, pressing a kiss to each forehead. "No more wandering tonight." "Good night, Father," they chorused, their voices blending into a single sound. "Good night, Elena," Rowan added. "Dream of better things," Riley finished. Griffin straightened and turned to Elena, gesturing for her to precede him into the hallway. Once the door was closed behind them, he spoke, his voice low. "I apologize if they disturbed you." "Not at all," Elena assured him. "They're lovely children." "They are," he agreed, a softness entering his voice. "Though they've had to grow up too quickly." "They told me about their mother," Elena said carefully. "I'm very sorry for your loss." Griffin's expression closed, the brief glimpse of the father replaced by the remote host. "Thank you. It's been difficult." They stood in the darkened hallway, the storm providing a soundtrack of wind and rain and distant thunder. Elena was acutely aware of his presence. Something about him seemed to fill more space than his physical form should allow, as though he existed on multiple planes simultaneously. "I should let you rest," he said finally. "Caleb will look at your car in the morning, though I suspect the roads will be impassable for some time. The storms in this region can be destructive." "I appreciate your hospitality," Elena said, "especially given the circumstances." "We rarely have visitors at Thornwood," Griffin replied, his dark eyes studying her face. "But sometimes exceptions must be made." The way he said it, as though her arrival was somehow significant beyond a simple act of charity, sent a shiver down Elena's spine. "Good night, Ms. Carter," he said, inclining his head slightly. "Good night, Mr. Hale." He turned and walked away, his footsteps making no sound on the ancient floorboards. Elena watched until he disappeared into the shadows at the end of the corridor, then returned to her room, locking the door behind her. A precaution that felt both necessary and futile in this strange house. The fire had burned down to embers, casting the room in a dim red glow. Elena slipped beneath the covers of the four-poster bed, the sheets cool against her skin. Despite her exhaustion, sleep seemed distant, her mind racing with questions about Thornwood and its inhabitants. Why did a family need a head of security? Who were Adrian's men, and why were they watching the roads? What had happened to Vivian Hale, and why did her death still cast such a palpable shadow over this household? Eventually, the rhythm of the rain lulled her into a fitful sleep, where she dreamed of dark corridors, whispering voices, and a pair of eyes that seemed to see straight through to her soul. Morning came with disorienting brightness. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world washed clean, sunlight streaming through gaps in the heavy curtains. For a moment, Elena couldn't remember where she was. The unfamiliar weight of expensive bedding, the scent of beeswax and old wood, the absolute silence that spoke of thick walls and isolation. Then it all came rushing back. Nathan's betrayal, her flight into the storm, the strange family who had taken her in. She sat up, pushing hair from her face, wondering what the day would bring, and how soon she could leave, despite having nowhere to go. A soft knock at the door preceded Maggie's cheerful voice. "Good morning. I've brought breakfast and some clothes that might fit you better than that nightgown." Elena wrapped herself in the throw and opened the door. Maggie bustled in with a tray and a stack of folded clothing, her energy a stark contrast to the previous night's somber atmosphere. "Did you sleep well?" the housekeeper asked, setting the tray on a small table by the window. "The storms can be frightful, but they always pass." "Well enough, thank you," Elena replied, eyeing the clothes curiously. "Are these—" "They belonged to Mrs. Hale," Maggie said, her voice softening. "Vivian. She was about your size, perhaps a bit taller. Mr. Hale thought you might be more comfortable in proper clothes." Elena touched the garments, a simple blouse of fine cotton, well-cut jeans, underwear still with tags attached. "I can't take these. They're not being used," Maggie said practically, "and Mr. Hale specifically suggested them. He rarely parts with anything of hers, so—" She let the implication hang in the air. It was a strange intimacy, wearing a dead woman's clothes, but Elena's options were limited. Her dress from the previous night was ruined, and she could hardly spend the day in a nightgown. "Please thank him for me," she said finally. "You can thank him yourself. He's asked to see you in his study once you've eaten and dressed." Maggie's expression was carefully neutral, but something in her tone suggested this was unusual. "Down the main staircase, through the entrance hall, first door on the left." After Maggie left, Elena ate quickly, fresh bread, fruit, and coffee so perfectly prepared it made her close her eyes in appreciation, then dressed in Vivian's clothes. They fit well, though the jeans were indeed a bit long. Looking in the mirror, Elena felt like an imposter, wearing a dead woman's clothes in her home, about to face her widower. The house in daylight was even more impressive than it had appeared in the storm. Sunlight poured through tall windows, illuminating details she had missed the night before. The intricate carvings on the banisters, the quality of the paintings lining the walls, the subtle patterns in the marble floor of the entrance hall. Thornwood spoke of old money, carefully preserved through generations. The door to Griffin's study was ajar. Elena knocked lightly on the frame. "Come in, Miss Carter." The room beyond was a bibliophile's dream. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes, a massive desk of some dark wood polished to a soft gleam, comfortable reading chairs positioned near tall windows that overlooked formal gardens. Griffin stood with his back to her, gazing out at the grounds, hands clasped behind him. "Your home is beautiful," Elena said, stepping into the room. He turned, and in the daylight, she could see him clearly for the first time. He was younger than she had initially thought, perhaps early 40s, with features that balanced strength and refinement. His eyes, which had seemed so dark the night before, were actually a deep blue, almost violet in certain light. "Thank you," he replied. "It has been in my family for generations." So Maggie mentioned. His gaze traveled over her, taking in the borrowed clothes, and something like approval flickered in his expression. "I see the clothes fit well enough." "Yes, thank you. It was very kind of you to offer them." Elena hesitated, then added, "I'm sorry about your wife." Griffin's expression didn't change, but she sensed a withdrawal, as though he had taken a step back while remaining physically in place. "Thank you. Please, sit down." Elena chose one of the reading chairs, and Griffin took the one opposite. the sunlight falling across his features, emphasizing the planes and angles of his face. "Caleb examined your car this morning," he said without preamble. "The electrical system is damaged, likely from driving through high water. It will need to be towed to a garage." "Oh." Elena's heart sank. Her car was her only real asset, the only thing that was truly hers after 10 years of marriage. "Is there a garage nearby? I can call for a tow." "The nearest qualified mechanic is in Riversend, about 30 miles from here," Griffin interrupted. "And I'm afraid the roads are still partially flooded. It will be at least 2 days before they're passable." 2 days. 2 days stranded in this strange house with these strange people. Elena felt a flutter of panic. "I can't impose on you for that long," she protested. "Perhaps there's a hotel nearby or—" "There isn't," Griffin said simply. "Thornwood is quite isolated. The nearest accommodation is also in Riversend." He studied her face, his expression unreadable. "You're welcome to stay until the road's clear and your car can be repaired. We have plenty of room, as you can see." There was something in his tone, not quite warmth, but perhaps a recognition of shared circumstance. Two people adrift, though for very different reasons. "That's very generous," Elena said carefully. "But I don't want to disrupt your household." A faint smile touched his lips, there and gone so quickly she might have imagined it. "Miss Carter, your presence is hardly disruptive. The twins seem quite taken with you already." Before Elena could respond, the study door burst open and Caleb strode in, his expression grim. "Sir, we have a situation. Adrian's men have been spotted at the eastern boundary." Griffin rose in one fluid motion, all traces of the cordial host vanishing. "How many?" "At least 6 that we've confirmed, armed. Lock down the house. Get the twins to the safe room." Griffin's voice had changed, hardened into something commanding and cold. "And make sure Miss Carter stays inside." "What's happening?" Elena asked, rising from her chair, alarm spreading through her. "Who is Adrian?" Griffin turned to her, and for a moment she glimpsed something in his eyes, something ancient and dangerous before he controlled it. "Adrian Blackwell, a man with whom my family has a long-standing disagreement. He's dangerous," Caleb added bluntly, "and his men are on our property with weapons." "Shouldn't we call the police?" Elena asked, bewildered by their reaction, which seemed more like a military response than a civilian one. Griffin and Caleb exchanged a look that spoke volumes. "The local authorities are not equipped to handle this situation," Griffin said carefully, "and they tend to ask questions that are complicated to answer." The implication hung in the air. Whatever conflict existed between Griffin Hale and this Adrian Blackwell, it existed outside the normal boundaries of law and society. "Ms. Carter, Elena," Griffin said, his use of her first name startling her. "I must ask you to go with Maggie. She'll take you somewhere safe within the house until this situation is resolved." "But, please." There was genuine concern in his voice now. "These men are dangerous. I would not forgive myself if you came to harm under my roof." As if summoned by his words, Maggie appeared in the doorway, her usually cheerful face tense with worry. "The girls are secure," she reported. "Come, Elena, quickly." Elena hesitated, looking between Griffin and Caleb, sensing that she was standing at the edge of something much larger and more dangerous than she had imagined. But what choice did she have? This was their home, their conflict. "Be careful," she said to Griffin, surprising herself with how much she meant it. He nodded once, his eyes holding hers for a moment longer than necessary. "Always." Maggie led her through a series of corridors, moving with the efficiency of someone who knew exactly where she was going and why speed was essential. They descended a narrow staircase hidden behind what had appeared to be a solid wall, emerging into a lower level of the house that felt older, more primal than the elegant spaces above. "What is this place?" Elena asked, her voice hushed in the cool, dim passage. "The old cellars," Maggie replied, her flashlight beam illuminating stone walls glistening with moisture. Parts of Thornwood are much older than the main house, dating back to colonial times, when certain precautions were necessary. Precautions against what? Maggie didn't answer directly. "The safe room is just ahead. The girls will be there already." The safe room turned out to be a surprisingly modern space carved out of the ancient cellars, concrete walls reinforced with what looked like steel, a heavy door that would not have been out of place in a bank vault, and inside, amenities that spoke of careful preparation. Bunk beds, a small bathroom, shelves stocked with food and water, even books and games. Rowan and Riley sat on one of the lower bunks, their expressions solemn but not frightened. They brightened when they saw Elena. "You're here too," Riley exclaimed. "Father said you might be," Rowan added. "Because of Adrian." "Who exactly is Adrian?" Elena asked, directing the question to Maggie as the older woman secured the heavy door behind them. "And why does he have armed men on your property?" Maggie sighed, sinking onto a chair. "It's a long story, and not entirely mine to tell. But the simple version is that Adrian Blackwell believes the Hale family has something that belongs to him." "Does they? Have something of his?" "No," Riley said firmly. "He's a liar. And a killer," Rowan added, her young voice hard with hatred. "He's the one who hurt our mother." Elena felt a chill run through her. "He killed your mother?" The twins exchanged one of their silent communications. "Not directly," Rowan said carefully. "But it was his fault. His men were hunting, and Mother was trying to protect us." "Hunting?" Elena repeated, confused. "Hunting what?" "Us," Riley said simply. "People like us." "Girls," Maggie interrupted, her tone warning. "That's enough. Your father would want us to wait quietly until he comes for us." But Elena's mind was racing, trying to make sense of the fragments she'd gathered. A family isolated in a mansion with security and safe rooms. Armed men hunting them. A long-standing conflict outside the bounds of normal law enforcement. "What are you not telling me?" she asked Maggie directly. "What is really happening? Here?" Before Maggie could answer, a sound penetrated even the thick walls of the safe room. A gunshot, followed by what might have been a scream. The twins clutched each other's hands, their faces pale but composed, as though they had expected this. Maggie closed her eyes briefly, her lips moving in what might have been a prayer. "They're here for Father," Riley whispered. "They always come for him first." "But they want us too," Rowan added. "All of us." Another shot rang out, closer this time. Elena moved instinctively toward the twins, placing herself between them and the door. Whatever was happening, whatever secrets this family held, these were children, children who had already lost their mother to violence. "Will your father be all right?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady for their sake. The twins looked at each other again, that silent exchange that seemed to contain entire conversations. "Father is strong," Rowan said. "Stronger than they know," Riley added. "But he won't kill them, even though he could," Rowan continued. "He doesn't like to kill humans." Humans. The word hung in the air, its implication so enormous that Elena's mind initially skipped over it, unable to process its meaning. But then her thoughts caught up, and she felt a coldness spread through her core that had nothing to do with the cellar's chill. "What do you mean, humans?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The door to the safe room shuddered under a sudden impact, something or someone slamming against it from the outside. The twins gasped in unison. Maggie moved with surprising speed, positioning herself in front of all of them. "They found us," she said grimly. "That shouldn't be possible." Another impact, harder this time. The massive door held, but a fine dust of concrete sifted down from around its frame. "We need to get out," Maggie said urgently. "There's another way. A tunnel that leads to the boathouse by the lake." Mr. Hale insisted on multiple exits. She moved to what appeared to be a solid wall and pressed her palm against a specific stone. A section of the wall slid back, revealing a narrow passage beyond. "Girls, go first," she ordered. "Elena, follow them. I'll come last and seal the entrance behind us." The twins slipped into the passage without hesitation, clearly familiar with this escape route. Elena hesitated, looking back at the door as it shuddered under another impact. "What about Griffin?" she asked. "And Caleb? Shouldn't we wait for them?" Maggie's expression was grim. "Mr. Hale can take care of himself. Our job is to protect the children." Another impact, and this time the door buckled slightly at its center. Whoever was on the other side was using something more powerful than human strength alone. "Go!" Maggie urged, pushing Elena toward the passage. "Now!" Elena entered the narrow tunnel, following the twins who moved ahead with the sure-footedness of those who had practiced this route. Behind her, she heard the scrape of stone as Maggie sealed the entrance, plunging them into darkness broken only by the beam of Maggie's flashlight. The passage was rough-hewn, barely wide enough for an adult to pass through comfortably. The air was damp and heavy with the scent of earth and stone. Water dripped somewhere ahead, a steady plink-plink that echoed in the confined space. "Stay close," Maggie whispered from behind her. "The tunnel branches ahead. We need to take the right fork." They moved as quickly as possible in the cramped conditions, the twins leading with surprising confidence. Elena's mind raced with questions, but survival instinct kept her silent, focusing on each step, each breath. The tunnel indeed branched, and they took the right fork as Maggie had instructed. This passage sloped upward, the air gradually becoming less stale, suggesting they were approaching the surface. "Almost there," Riley whispered back to them. "The boathouse is just ahead." A crash echoed through the tunnel, distant but unmistakable. Someone had broken through the safe room door. "Faster," Maggie urged, her voice tight with fear. The twins increased their pace, and Elena followed suit, her heart pounding against her ribs. The tunnel ended at what appeared to be a dead end, but Rowan reached up and pushed against a specific spot in the ceiling. A trapdoor swung upward, revealing a square of gray light. One by one, they climbed up into what was indeed a boathouse, a simple structure containing several small boats and equipment for maintaining them. Through slatted windows, Elena could see a lake stretching away into the distance, its surface rippled by a light breeze. "We need to keep moving," Maggie said, already heading for the door. "There's a caretaker's cottage on the other side of the lake. We'll be safer there." But as she reached for the handle, the door burst inward with such force that it tore from its hinges. Maggie was thrown backward, colliding with a stack of life preservers that collapsed around her. In the doorway stood a man, tall, lean, with the focused intensity of a predator. His clothes were expensive but practical, and the gun in his hand was pointed steadily at Maggie's prone form. Adrian, Rowan whispered, the name a curse on her young lips. The man, Adrian Blackwell, smiled, though the expression never reached his cold gray eyes. Hello, children. It's been a while. Elena lunged forward without thinking, placing herself between the twins and Adrian's weapon. Leave them alone, she commanded, her voice steadier than she felt. Adrian's eyes flickered with surprise, then amusement. The human nanny. How predictable. He kept the gun trained on them, his gaze calculating. Step aside. My business is with the vampire spawn, not you. I said no. Elena spread her arms wider, shielding Rowan and Riley behind her. She could feel them trembling against her back, their small hands clutching at her shirt. A slow smile spread across Adrian's face. Loyal to monsters. That's a shame. He adjusted his aim directly at Elena's heart. But ultimately, a blur of movement interrupted him as Caleb crashed through the boathouse wall in a shower of splintered wood. He collided with Adrian at inhuman speed, sending the hunter's shot wide. The bullet splintered a wooden beam inches from Elena's head. Get them out, Caleb shouted, grappling with Adrian on the floor. The hunter was stronger than he appeared, matching Caleb's supernatural strength with practiced technique. The boat! Go now! Maggie was already on her feet, pulling a small motorboat closer to the water's edge. Help me, she called to Elena, who rushed to assist, dragging the twins with her. Behind them, Adrian managed to slam his elbow into Caleb's temple, momentarily stunning the vampire. He reached for a second weapon in his ankle holster, but Caleb recovered quickly, knocking it from his hand. They're not alone, Adrian spat, blood trickling from his split lip. My team is all ready. Caleb silenced him with a brutal strike that left the hunter unconscious. He rose, breathing hard despite not needing to breathe. That won't hold him long. We need to move. They pushed the boat into the water, the twins clambering in first, followed by Maggie. Elena hesitated, looking back at the tunnel entrance. Griffin is handling things at the house, Caleb assured her, though tension lined his face. He ordered me to protect you and the children at all costs. The sound of voices echoed from the tunnel. More hunters. Now, Elena, Caleb urged, practically lifting her into the boat before jumping in himself. He started the motor with a quick pull, and they skimmed across the lake's surface, leaving ripples in their wake. Elena held the twins close as they huddled against her. Riley was silently crying, while Rowan stared back at the shrinking boathouse with haunted eyes. It's Nathan, isn't it? Elena asked, the pieces finally clicking into place. He's working with the hunters. Maggie nodded grimly. Griffin suspected as much. Your ex-husband has been feeding them information about the estate's defenses, the children's routines. But why would vampire hunters work with a human? Elena asked. Money, Caleb said flatly, steering them toward a small cottage barely visible through the morning mist. And mutual interests. Nathan wants the twins gone to hurt Griffin, and Blackwell's group wants all vampires exterminated. Temporary alliances are common in war. War. The word hung in the air between them. This wasn't just about custody or divorce spite anymore. This was life and death. As they approached the cottage, Elena saw movement on the shore. Her heart leapt to her throat until she recognized the tall, imposing figure waiting for them. Griffin, she whispered. The boat hadn't fully reached the shore when she jumped out, water soaking her to the knees as she splashed toward him. He met her halfway, pulling her into a fierce embrace that lifted her from the water. You're safe, he murmured against her hair. When the alarm triggered, I thought... He didn't finish the sentence, just held her tighter. The twins rushed to them, and Griffin knelt to gather them in his arms. I'm sorry, he told them. I promised you would never have to face hunters again. It's not your fault, Daddy, Riley said, her small voice determined despite her tear-streaked face. Griffin looked up at Elena, his eyes haunted. They've breached the main house, at least 6 hunters, maybe more, and Nathan is with them. Elena felt a cold fury replace her fear. He brought them to our home. Griffin's expression softened at her use of our, but hardened again immediately. They're searching for something specific. Nathan kept demanding to know where it was. The artifact, Maggie said, joining them. The one that can strip a vampire's immortality. Elena remembered the ancient box Griffin had shown her in his study, the one containing what looked like a ceremonial dagger with strange markings. He'd explained it was one of the few objects that could permanently kill an original vampire like himself. We need to keep moving, Caleb interrupted, scanning the tree line. This location won't stay secure for long. Griffin nodded. There's a car hidden half a mile from here. It will take us to the city safe house. They moved quickly through the woods, Griffin carrying Riley while Rowan insisted on walking, her small face set in determination. Elena stayed close to them, hyper-aware of every snapping twig and rustling leaf. They're coming, Caleb suddenly announced, his head tilting as he caught sounds beyond human hearing. From the east, at least 3. Griffin handed Riley to Maggie. Take them ahead to the car. Caleb and I will handle this. No, Elena said firmly. We stay together. If we separate, they'll pick us off one by one. Griffin's expression darkened. Elena, this isn't... I'm not arguing, she cut him off. These are trained killers who know exactly what they're hunting. Our best chance is together. A tense moment passed before Griffin nodded reluctantly. Stay behind me, he ordered, and they continued forward at a faster pace. They'd covered perhaps a quarter mile when the first shot rang out, splintering bark from a tree inches from Elena's head. Griffin moved with blinding speed, shoving her and the twins behind a fallen log before charging toward their attacker. Caleb disappeared into the trees in the opposite direction, executing a flanking maneuver. Maggie pulled a small handgun from beneath her jacket, a sight that momentarily stunned Elena. You didn't think I've survived this long without learning to defend myself, did you? The housekeeper asked with grim humor. The sounds of fighting erupted from multiple directions, grunts, impacts, and occasional gunfire. Elena kept the twins pressed low behind the log, her body covering theirs. Elena. The voice froze her blood. She turned slowly to find Nathan standing 10 feet away, a crossbow in his hands pointed directly at her. His once handsome face was twisted with a cold satisfaction that made him almost unrecognizable. Step away from the abominations, he said calmly, as though asking her to pass the salt at dinner. Elena shifted, making sure she remained between Nathan and the children. You betrayed us to hunters, your own goddaughter. Nathan's jaw tightened. My goddaughter died the day that monster turned her. These are just parasites wearing children's faces. They're still Rowan and Riley, Elena insisted. The same kids who made you birthday cards and fell asleep on your shoulder during movie nights. Clever mimicry, Nathan spat. Nothing more. Behind her, Elena could feel Rowan trembling with rage and fear. She reached back, squeezing the girl's hand in reassurance. What happened to you, Nathan? She asked, deliberately keeping him talking while her eyes searched for any sign of Griffin or Caleb. This isn't just about our divorce. A flicker of genuine emotion crossed Nathan's face. Pain, perhaps even grief. My sister was killed by one of them 3 years ago, while you were playing house with these creatures. I was burying what was left of her. Elena felt a pang of sympathy despite herself. I'm sorry about your sister, truly, but these children had nothing to do with that. They're all the same, Nathan said, his voice hardening again. And Griffin Hale is the worst of them, the original who spawned generations of killers. He adjusted his aim. Now move, or I'll shoot through you. Elena stood her ground. You'll have to. Nathan's finger tightened on the trigger, but before he could fire, a blur of motion knocked him sideways. The crossbow discharged, the bolt embedding itself in a nearby tree as Griffin tackled Nathan to the ground. They struggled violently, Nathan somehow managing to hold his own against the vampire's strength. Elena realized with horror that he was wearing some kind of reinforced gauntlets, hunter technology designed to match supernatural power. Run! Griffin shouted to her between blows. Instead, Elena spotted the fallen crossbow. She lunged for it, grabbing it just as another hunter emerged from the trees, a silver blade gleaming in his hand. Without hesitation, she raised the weapon and fired. The bolt caught the hunter in the shoulder, spinning him backward. Griffin and Nathan continued their brutal fight, crashing through underbrush and slamming each other against trees. Nathan pulled something from his belt, a syringe filled with amber liquid that he tried to plunge into Griffin's neck. Griffin caught his wrist, the needle hovering inches from his skin. Dead man's blood, Nathan grunted. Enough to paralyze, even you. With a roar of effort, Griffin twisted Nathan's arm until the bones snapped. Nathan screamed, the syringe falling from his useless fingers. Griffin pinned him to the ground, fangs extended, eyes blazing with inhuman fury. Griffin, don't! Elena called out. The twins are watching! Griffin froze, his gaze finding the children's wide eyes over Elena's shoulder. With visible effort, he retracted his fangs and stood, keeping one foot pressed on Nathan's chest. It's over, Nathan, he said coldly. Your hunters are dead or fleeing. You've lost. Nathan laughed through his pain, blood bubbling at the corner of his mouth. You think this ends with me? Blackwell has been planning this for years. The estate is compromised. They know about the tunnels, the safe rooms, everything. A chill ran through Elena. How could they know all that? Nathan's eyes found hers, filled with malice. You really should be more careful about the nanny agencies you use, Elena. Maggie has been quite helpful. Elena turned in horror to find Maggie standing behind her, the gun now pointed at the twins. I'm sorry, Elena, Maggie said, her voice steady. But Nathan's right about one thing. They're not human anymore. You've been working for Blackwell all along, Elena whispered, the betrayal cutting deep. All those confidences shared, all those moments of supposed friendship, lies, Maggie's expression hardened. My entire family was slaughtered by vampires when I was a child. I watched it happen from a closet where my mother hid me. So yes, I've dedicated my life to Blackwell's cause. Griffin took a step toward her, but Maggie shook her head. Stay where you are, or I shoot them first, then her. You won't leave this forest alive if you harm them, Griffin promised, his voice deadly quiet. Perhaps not, Maggie acknowledged. But I'll complete my mission. She gestured with the gun. Now, Mr. Hale, you're going to tell me where you've moved the artifact. While attention was focused on Griffin, Elena saw Rowan slowly reaching for something on the ground, a sharp stone. The girl caught Elena's eye, and Elena gave an imperceptible nod. The artifact was never at the estate, Griffin said, drawing Maggie's full attention. It's in a vault in Switzerland. Even I can't access it without biometric verification from 3 separate trustees. Maggie's face contorted with fury. You're lying. In that moment of distraction, Rowan hurled the stone with supernatural accuracy. It struck Maggie's hand, causing her to drop the gun with a cry of pain. Elena lunged forward, tackling the woman to the ground. They struggled fiercely, Maggie's training evident in every calculated move. She slammed her elbow into Elena's ribs, then flipped their positions, pinning Elena beneath her. Her hands found Elena's throat, squeezing with surprising strength. I liked you, Elena, Maggie hissed as Elena fought for breath. That's why I'll make this. Quick! Black spots danced at the edges of Elena's vision. Through them, she saw Griffin trying to reach her, but Nathan had recovered enough to grab his ankle, holding him back. The twins were screaming. With the last of her strength, Elena reached up and drove her thumbs into Maggie's eyes. The woman shrieked, loosening her grip just enough for Elena to buck her off. Gasping for air, Elena scrambled away, but Maggie was already recovering, reaching for a knife in her boot. Before she could draw it, a small figure barreled into her. Riley, her child's face transformed with rage, tiny fangs extended. No! Elena cried out as Maggie swung the knife toward Riley. The blade never connected. Caleb appeared as if from nowhere, catching Maggie's wrist and twisting until the knife clattered to the ground. In one fluid motion, he snapped her neck, letting her body fall lifelessly to the forest floor. In the sudden silence that followed, Elena could hear only her own ragged breathing and the twins' soft sobs. She crawled to them, pulling them against her chest, murmuring reassurances even as her own tears fell. Griffin finally broke free from Nathan, knocking him unconscious with a precise blow. He rushed to Elena and the children, gathering all 3 in his arms. Are you hurt? He demanded, his hands gentle as they checked Elena for injuries. She shook her head, though her throat throbbed painfully. The twins? We're okay, Rowan answered, her voice small but steady. Riley nodded in agreement, though she was trembling violently. Caleb approached, his clothing torn and bloodied. The area is secure. All hunters neutralized or fled. But we need to move. There could be reinforcements. Griffin helped Elena to her feet, keeping one arm around her waist. The car is close. We'll head to the city safe house until we can assess the full extent of the breach. As they walked, Elena glanced back at Nathan's unconscious form. What about him? Griffin's expression darkened. Caleb will ensure he faces human justice. With the evidence we've gathered of his conspiracy with Blackwell, he'll spend the rest of his life in prison. Elena nodded, satisfied. Death would have been too easy for Nathan. Living with his failure would be a far more fitting punishment. They reached the hidden car, a nondescript SUV with tinted windows. As Caleb secured the still unconscious Nathan in the trunk, Elena settled in the back seat with the twins. Griffin took the wheel, his movements precise despite the wounds he'd sustained. What happens now? Elena asked as they pulled onto a narrow service road. Griffin met her eyes in the rearview mirror. We rebuild. We adapt. We find a new home. But what about school? Riley asked in a small voice. And my friends? And my piano lessons? Rowan added. Griffin's expression softened. We'll figure it all out, I promise. The most important thing is that we're together. Elena felt something, warm, unfurl in her chest, despite everything they'd just endured. Family. Not the one she'd been born into or the one she'd tried to create with Nathan, but something stronger, a family forged in crisis, bound by choice rather than obligation. As they drove through the gathering dusk, the twins eventually fell asleep against Elena, emotionally exhausted. In the front seat, Caleb made quiet phone calls, setting security protocols in motion. "Elena," Griffin said softly, not wanting to wake the children. "What you did today. Putting yourself between danger and my children." "Our children," she corrected gently. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. "There's something I need to ask you. Something I've been considering since the night you stayed." Elena waited, her heart suddenly racing. "I want you in our lives permanently," Griffin said, his voice low and intense. "Not as an employee, not as a guest, but as family." "Are you proposing?" Elena asked, a smile tugging at her lips despite the bruises forming on her throat. Griffin's eyes met hers in the mirror again, centuries of loneliness and newfound hope reflected in their depths. "I'm offering you a choice, a life with us, all of us, however you want that to look." Elena stroked Riley's hair, feeling the steady rise and fall of the child's breathing against her side. "And if I want forever?" The question hung between them, its implications clear. Becoming like them. Immortality. "Then forever is yours," Griffin answered simply. "But only if you're certain." 3 months later, Elena stood at the window of their new home, a restored chateau in the French countryside, remote enough for privacy, but close enough to a small village for the children to have some normalcy. The estate's grounds were extensive, protected by both modern security and ancient vampire magic. Behind her, Rowan was practicing piano, her small fingers moving confidently over the keys. Riley sat cross-legged on the floor nearby, sketching intently. They had both shown remarkable resilience, though there were still nightmares and moments of fear. The therapist who specialized in supernatural trauma was helping them process everything they'd experienced. Elena touched the small scar at the base of her throat, the mark of her choice. Griffin had performed the transformation himself 2 weeks ago, after extensive preparation. The transition had been difficult, but briefer than expected, her body adapting to immortality with surprising ease. Everything was different now. Colors more vivid, sounds more distinct, scents more complex. The hunger was manageable with Griffin's guidance, and she'd taken only donated blood so far. The power flowing through her veins still felt foreign, but less frightening with each passing day. Caleb entered the room, nodding respectfully to Elena. He'd become more than security, a trusted friend, almost an uncle to the twins. "The perimeter is secure," he reported. "And there's been no sign of Blackwell since Prague." The hunter had gone underground after their last confrontation, where Elena had used her newfound strength to protect the twins during an ambush. She hadn't killed him, had chosen not to, but she'd made it clear that any further attempts against her family would end differently. "Thank you, Caleb," she said, smiling as Riley bounded over to show him her latest drawing. Footsteps approached from behind, and strong arms encircled her waist. Griffin rested his chin on her shoulder, his chest solid against her back. "Any regrets?" he murmured against her ear. Elena leaned into him, watching their reflection in the window glass. Two immortals with eternity before them. Not one. Outside, twilight was falling over the vineyard, painting the landscape in shades of purple and gold. From this room, they could see for miles, the village lights twinkling in the distance, the ancient forest beyond. the mountains rising on the horizon. A world of possibilities stretched before them. The piano music shifted as Rowan began a new piece, something she'd composed herself, hauntingly beautiful in its simplicity. Riley hummed along, adding her voice to her sister's creation. The sound wove through the room, binding them together in this moment of perfect peace. Elena turned in Griffin's arms, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. His lips were warm against hers, warmer than they'd been before her transformation, now that they shared the same supernatural nature. When she pulled back, his eyes were filled with a love that had waited centuries to find its home. "Forever," she whispered, the word both a promise and a celebration. As darkness embraced the chateau, Elena felt the steady rhythm of her new existence settling into her bones, the eternal heartbeat of a family that had found each other against impossible odds. Outside, an owl called into the gathering night, its voice echoing across their sanctuary. Not a warning this time, but a welcome to the endless twilight of their shared immortality.